Hey, everybody. I am so excited for you to see this interview that I did with director Matt Lenz. And it went so easily and so fluidly that I didn't really have to ask him any questions. So there's very little context about who he and I are in relationship to one another. And so here you go. Context. Matt and I met working at a theme park in Nashville, Tennessee called Opryland, which is now a parking lot. And we were seeing the same material in the double casts of the same show. That's how we met and became friends. And shortly after that, Matt already lived in New York, but shortly after that, I moved to New York, and Matt was looking for a roommate, and he and I got an apartment together and lived together for 2.5 years on the Upper West Side. And then we were young actors together there, and we got rid of that apartment and got our own separate apartments. And as you probably already know, Matt has gone on to be a very notable director, hence this interview. Please enjoy. The stories we tell in the theater matter. They have the power to heal, to change hearts and minds, and at their best, they reflect our humanity. Through the shared experience of laughter, music, and drama, we understand one another better. Did you write that?
I did.
Yeah, I thought so.
It was born out of, at a certain point, being on a sort of career grind and feeling like I was doing show after show after show after show. And I wanted to figure out, I wanted to begin to, and this was, 15 years ago to whatever, begin to try to focus my work on stuff that I felt was offering something to the world. We start our careers oftentimes, in your 20s or whatever, and, you're just trying to get work and whatever it is. And at a certain point, hopefully, and I feel blessed to have gotten to a certain point where you have a little bit more choice over what you want to do and who you want to do it with. When you start to put work out into the world and you spend a lot of your time as an adult working on something, you really hope it matters. You really hope it reaches somebody and changes a mind or informs somebody. In an interesting way, this pandemic has been a reset for me to be able to sort of sit back, take a breath and go, okay, now moving forward from here, what is it that I really have to offer? What is it that the world sort of needs me to do? Again, oftentimes we just get in the habit of saying, yes, does it fit in my schedule? Sure, I'll be there, as opposed to saying, is this in line with my sort of bigger purpose?
I mean, you were working for Charles Busch. You were working in a Charles Busch play.
Yeah.
Very early on, like Charles who then?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Except to us.
Yes.
And you were in one, bare-chested.
Yeah, exactly. I
Naked.
still have the poster. And that in a way feels like a different lifetime, looking back on those, that time, Vampire Lesbians of Sodom and, working in press at that time was sort of my side hustle, or was kind of an interesting, and in a way I look back on that now, being that period was the time when I decided that I wanted to direct. In part, I loved doing vampires. It was a real kick, but it was doing a show, a long running show for a couple of years and doing 8 shows a week after week made me miss the creative process, and I realized that that's a part of a professional actor's job, which I'd never done a show for 2 years before. And you realize, oh, I have to do it again and again and again and try to figure out that muscle. That wasn't as fun to me personally. What I really love is the rehearsals and, those first weeks or months when you're still figuring it out and you're still making lots of discoveries.
Just to clarify, so Matt, you were working for Pete Sanders, who worked for Shirley Hers.
That's right.
Who was one of the biggest, press agencies in the theater business at the time.
Yeah.
And Pete represented, or Shirley represented Charles Busch. Is that right? Do I have that?
Represented vampires, which is how Pete and I met. Yeah. And
coincidence that you were in that? Which came first?
Pete and I met. He early on said, oh, I represent Vampire Lesbians, and actually they're looking for somebody. And so I auditioned and did that thing. And then we stayed friends. And then at a certain point after I was in Vampires, he said, he was looking for somebody to assist him, but he was working within the Shirley office. And he brought me in to help him with a couple of projects. And then I started working for the office at large and Pete. And, and then Pete started his own office in the, I don't know, maybe 93 or 94. And I went with him. I was his one and only, office employee,
I remember.
for that first year. I learned a lot about the other side of the business. And I became more and more aware of, who was really on the inside of the creative process and who was supporting it, meaning, general managers and all those kinds of things and what all those people did. So it was really eye-opening, and also coming into a contact with a great number of people that were at the height of their careers. Yeah, it was during that time with Pete that I kind of thought, all right, I'm at an impasse here. I'm either going to be a press agent for the rest of my life, or I'm going to change course here, and I knew, directing was something I had, been thinking about and had, played around with in college. So I decided to assist and sort of learn it. And one thing led to the next. I mean, my first big job was at Beauty and the Beast on Broadway. It had just opened on Broadway. And
who was the director?
Rob Roth. It had just opened, and they were already planning, national tours and 7 international productions and all of it. And it just kind of, he asked me to work with him, and away I went. And that really was I worked for Disney for 8 years then. It was Beauty and the Beast at first, and then Aida. I was his associate director, actually when it was called Elaborate Lives. Once I sort of got on that train, it just kind of left the station.
How did you meet Jack O'Brien?
I originally met Jack, I'll make it a short story, but when I was an actor auditioning for him, when he was at the Old Globe in San Diego. That's when I first met him, and then I became more and more aware of him as a director doing Broadway shows. And then I met him as a director and as a young emerging director during Damn Yankees on Broadway, the revival. And then we became friendly, actually socially, during the Full Monty, without me ever kind of saying, "Hey, I want to work for you." And then I was offered Full Monty for some of the tours and all that. Couldn't do it because I was working at Disney, and then ended up, he asked me to do Hairspray with him. So, and that took me on a whole nother ride. That was like, it's funny. He was like, I'm going to do this thing called Hairspray. And, he was a little confused actually at why they had asked him, but I think, the show, which was always good and always fun and always sort of quirky, hugely benefited from Jack's groundedness and honesty and truth telling. One of the great things about the show is that it's got all of that sort of fluff and pop, and yet it's really grounded in great humanity and heart, and I think that's the sort of magical balance of the piece.
But I was looking at your resume, and I remembered, it reminded me that Jack was, or it was my impression that Jack was known for directing particular productions. Now, obviously for you, Hairspray would be one of them. Beauty and the Beast would be one of them. Catch Me If You Can would be one of them, because you did that also. You assisted Jack also on Broadway and did the national tours.
Yeah,
I read that, but I knew that. I remembered that. But regionally, I see that you'll do a Guys and Dolls at 3 different theaters or something. Yes. In that world, as a director and in creative teams, and I see that you're represented as well, is that coincidence? Is it on purpose? Does a theater know, oh, I saw Matt Lenz Guys and Dolls, we're doing it this season, we're going to contact him? Do they say to you, we have a musical director and a choreographer for you? Or do they say to you, do you want to pick your choreographer and musical director?
Yeah, it's interesting because, working on big shows like Beauty and the Beast opened a lot of doors regionally, because oftentimes the Muni, for instance, the Muni hired me to do Beauty and the Beast, which was the first time they'd done that. And they want somebody who knows the machinations of the show, generally, particularly something they've never done before, and something that's as complicated as Beauty and the Beast. And it really is. There's lots of magic and moving parts and crazy costumes and, all of it. So part of it is practical sometimes for theaters like that. Those opportunities, open up doors. So you go down and hopefully you deliver and do a great job with Beauty and the Beast for them. And then they say, oh, next year we're doing Evita. Would you like to, do that? Or we're doing these 3 shows. Do you have a choice of what you'd like to do? So it gives you an opportunity to kind of go and improve yourself. In each theater, it's always a bit of a negotiation depending on the time period that they, the rehearsal period. Certain regional theaters will rent a costume package or a scenic package depending on what their budget limitations are. So, going in that you're going to do your version of, Jesus Christ Superstar, but it's going to be on the set from, the first national tour or something like that. Certain things like Hairspray that I never, other than the Muni, I always did, I did, I think 14 productions of the show, which were international productions and national tours. And, I always did that original production because I thought I'm so close to it. I don't want to take it apart and put it back together again. And I always thought if there's a revival in 25 years, and I'm so far from it, it would be fun to just kind of look at it fresh. But I thought it was so perfect in so many ways to begin with. It would be really hard, especially in a 2 or 3 week rehearsal period where, I'm like, it's not broken. Let's not, let's just do what we got. So I have turned down productions of Hairspray actually that weren't, didn't want to or weren't able to afford all the original, choreography and all of that.
So I'm thinking, to the degree which you can answer this, because I don't mean for it to be personal, and then I saw that you're represented. Because a lot of actors will be watching this, how does agenting involve itself in that versus an actor? Because it sounds very much like an actor's career. We have agents, but we go to auditions, and it's a very small business, and so it's quite the talent, kind of helps it self-run. And then there's someone who, an agent who can, organize that and get the logistics and the money and stuff done. Does agenting play a different part in that?
Hopefully at a certain point in your career, you have reputation. And so people, you're on people's lists, either as an actor or as a director. I would say, the agent, maybe 10%, which is, interesting, gets instigated by her. She might suggest that I meet somebody. Sometimes it's somebody will call her about a project that they're they're asking about a specific director that she also represents, or a designer. And they say, we don't have a director yet. And she's able to say, oh, well, you should talk to so-and-so, you should talk to Matt and see, I think Matt might be right for this. Or, sometimes I will say to her, I think this is going on. I don't know much about it. Can you do some, research to find out who's connected to this? At 90% of it is just the rolling, whether it's reputation or just a place you've worked before or a project that you have been developing that now gets a production. So you're attached to it already.
Work that you've had on the books was canceled.
Yeah.
Has anything materialized?
I was working on a new show with Jack, actually, a new musical for Broadway, a country western musical. And we had big workshops lined up, and then we were supposed to be, actually, we would have been in DC right now at the National Theater doing our out of town tryout. We've continued over the summer to meet and with the writers and continue to hone the piece itself. And we did one Zoom reading, which was a little awkward, to be honest. It was just hard to get the sense of the momentum of the piece. So we're all waiting to get back in the room together. I had the tour of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was up and running and was out. That closed down. We're hoping that maybe in the summertime that can pick up again, the summer of 21. I'm working on another Hairspray tour. Actually, that's what I was casting when all this happened. The touring stuff is tricky because you've got to string together enough cities that are confident enough and, registering low enough virus that, you can get a tour out of it. I don't say this without, in a pessimistic way, but I do think it's at least the middle of next year. In the meantime, I'm doing, other creative things. I gave myself a break this spring because my immediate reaction was, I've got to do something. Like, what can I be doing? I've got to, and I thought, what you can do is just take a breath. I've started just working on some little writing projects that I also don't, I thought, what if they never go anywhere except just me and my computer,
Uh-huh.
like things that I've thought, well, that's not enough of a formed idea to really sit down and do it. Well, sit down and do it and it'll become more formed than it was, So
Is there a pleasing and positive way that an actor presents themselves or their material in the room that when you see it, you wish more actors did that or understood that?
I think, their confidence is most impressive to me in the room. And I don't mean somebody coming in with a cocky attitude or I got this kind of thing, but confidence to be able to be flexible, to be able to go with the flow in the room, to be able to sort of just not second guess the process that you're in, but go in, listen to what's being asked of you. Don't get ahead of yourself in terms of saying, what does this mean? Or why aren't they having me do side 3? That's the one I worked on most. But flexibility and ease.
How to speak to someone in the room, I came to over time
Mm-hmm.
get less nervous through preparation.
Yeah.
There was less to be nervous about if I knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
And that the ability to speak to someone as a human was an evolution.
But the more you know the role and you can see yourself in it, and hopefully you genuinely can, or generally can, that you're not auditioning for things and going, oh God, I could never play this role. But, finding your way into it and having, because of preparation and because of knowledge of the material and immersion in the material, you can feel confident that I can play this role. I may not get picked to do it this round, but I can do it. I have something to bring to this. And what I need now is the reflection from the director or the musical director, whoever, the choreographer, the people that are putting this particular production together in order to sort of feed my version of it. But I have a perfectly valid, prepared version of what this role is, and I can see myself in it.
In the virtual audition process, so we're talking about actors, and or including in your answer the virtual audition process, because that's gonna be it, isn't it? At first,
I think for a while, absolutely. I mean, for instance, on a couple of my projects, I've said, I think we can narrow this down to a couple of choices for each role. But at the end of the day, it's theater. I feel like I'm going to need to get in the room with these people.
right?
And principal auditions, I think you're going to be able to do fairly safely and easily because, we can stand away from each other. We can do that. And we don't have to fill up the room. Dance calls and stuff like that, it's going to be a trickier road.
So, lastly, what when you think about it, what's it looking like?
Yeah.
Um,
I feel like the positive side of it is there's a lot of great relevant work that's going to come out of this. I think being an optimist and a humanist, I think that this has given the entire globe a chance to kind of think a little bit. And not everybody's taking advantage of it, but I think a lot of artists have. I think that there's going to be some really profoundly relevant human work that comes out of this. And I think we'll probably start small. I mean, it's just practically speaking, it's going to be easier to do a one-person show or a couple of people show or a series of monologues and than it is going to be, as I was saying earlier, huge national tours that, with giant orchestras crammed into pits and, all of that. So I think it's going to start small, but I think it may just give us the opportunity to really be specific about our experience. If the static has calmed down, it's an opportunity to kind of cut through. And I think a lot of people are going to do that. A lot of creatives um, are thinking in that way. And I also think the inequity and the politics and all of that are happening now, I think this has been a kind of good reset for all of that too, which is going to create some more interesting, diverse, powerful work. I'm definitely hopeful. The theater has survived thousands of years, and there's a reason that Broadway, and not just Broadway, that the theater around the world, around the country, is thriving, because people, the more devices we have, I think the more people need and want theater. So it will survive, and not just theater, arts and dance and music and all of it.
Yeah, and through their shared experience and through their shared experience of laughter, music, and drama, we understand one another better.
Yeah.
I mean, that just kind of comes to mind.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Well,
Well,
this is fun.
this is totally fun. It's so great to hang out with you.
Yeah.